While writing an article about the history of FMV and kind of where it is going now, I found myself at a little lack of knowledge about the genre. So I thought it'd be interesting to sit down with a few people who maybe knew a little bit more about the genre than myself to get their thoughts on the 90s craze to what indies are doing with the genre now. So I set out to learn more. And well, you'll see from the video that I was able to sit down with Randy Nelson, former executive editor of PSM Magazine, Nintendo power contributor and founding editor of IGN. Today, I'm here with Randy Nelson, a retired video game journalist. Fair enough to say?
Yeah, I don't know if you can ever really be retired from the profession, but yeah, I do something a little different nowadays.
Well, so you are formerly PlayStation Magazine's executive editor, Nintendo
hmm
power contributor, and actually the founding editor of IGN.
Yeah, one of them. There were a few of us in a very small room.
That's kind of crazy to think about now. I brought you here because not only do I respect your opinions, but you were probably kind of close to like you were like in it when the kind of whole FMV craze potentially hit. Do
Yeah,
you
one
remember?
of them.
Yeah, there was lots of phases. I
Oh
like
yeah,
oh yeah, there's like
ages of them. Yeah.
I calculated I think between 1990 and 1999 there were 136 FMV games that came out.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if you told me like a number twice as big.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm actually, you talk about the 90s, but I actually was playing them, since the 80s.
Oh wow. Okay.
Technically, I mean, Laserdisc,
Oh
it
yeah.
was kind of
Okay.
before like the live action stuff, and I actually have I had turned it on here, but I actually have this replica of Dragon's Lair, which is a Laserdisc game by Don Bluth. And it was the very first FMV, if you want to call it that, FMV game I played back in 1984. And yeah, and I've been obsessed with them ever since. So hopefully you've come to the right place.
Yeah. So have you like professionally covered any of them that you remember? Obviously, it's
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly,
yeah.
undoubtedly. When I started my career in games reporting or games journalism, or whatever folks call it nowadays, yeah, there were a whole slew of those. It was actually kind of though on, maybe just on the tail end of when there were, I always kind of talk about them being Sega CD games because those are the
Well,
most of the
that's
most
where
of the
most
FMV
people
games I
remember
own.
them from, right? So
Yeah, yeah, like, I don't know, is there, like, a Marky Mark game? No, there was, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I
Uh,
wouldn't be
Maybe there
surprised.
was. Anyways, but so those kind of games, at the time were kind of not on the way out, but there just weren't as many of them being made. So, I sure I reviewed some full motion video games at some point
Yeah.
as I kind of worked through the original PlayStation era and then the PS2 era. There are always like reattempts to sort of bring those back. And, on the PS1 and then, the PS2 and so on, the quality of video playback kept getting better. And then, you started introducing, DVD ROM and had more video. And yeah, I mean, I don't review them, but I still play them up to this day, and they're so much more sophisticated now with like Her Story and Telling Lies.
Out of the kind of early to mid to even late 90s FMV games, do you have a favorite?
Oh, I mean, it's a bit of a toss up,
Yeah.
Um, I'm like endlessly entertained and just sort of I don't know, like made to laugh by Night Trap.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It was one of the earlier ones that I played that was live action and where it was kind of built around sort of like a combination of like, Sega CD graphics plus video. So you had like the multiple feeds and things like that and like indicators on the screen. Before that, it was always like Laserdisc basically. So just like it would cut to a different scene. You do something like Mad Dog McCree, the old, old West shooter. You'd shoot something and it would like cut to a different scene. But this was like you could have simultaneous streams of FMV.
Is there one that you would, if somebody was kind of going out of their way to go back into these 90s FMV games, is
Uh-huh.
there one that you would recommend that they start their journey with?
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, Night Trap is a little kind of out there. It's a little fringe, I think. It's it's like a deep it's a deep cut, but it's also really well known.
Yeah,
So it's not necessarily though one I would say, oh yeah, this is your starter FMV game. I mean, if any one of them really kind of stands out, and I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard it or seen it in your reporting, but that would have to be Sewer Shark. I mean, that is not a super great game. I mean, that's one of the qualities, if you could call it that, of I think some of these FMV games of this era where
yeah,
they were kind of, going live action and doing it on consoles, was that, there's a game, it's interactive, but they're not necessarily, like, these blockbuster,
yeah.
10 out of 10s or anything like that. But the thing was, like, back at the time, they were fun and they were different and new, and nobody had really kind of seen this sort of thing before. And Sewer Shark, I mean, I love shooters, and so it's a really action-packed game where you're, you know, the name doesn't really imply or convey this, but it does take place in sewers, and you're not a shark, but rather you're flying this like anti-gravity,
Of
like
course.
ship,
Of
this kind
course.
of like assault ship, right? And it's all like heavily like aliens, marines-esque themed. So it's very rough, and you've got this guy who's kind of like, I don't know if he's like Goose from Top Gun. He's not really your co-pilot. He's just this other pilot in this like group that goes and protects, the city from all of the crazy mutants living in the giant sewers. And so you've got this guy, and he's just constantly trash talking you because it was the 90s or the early
Of
90s, and
course,
that was
yeah.
like the cool thing to do, right? Was like everything insulted you all the time. Like, you're not good enough, I'm sick of scraping you off the sewers, you rookie, or things like that. Anyways, but it made, I thought, really good use of that combination of, FMV and then graphics at the time. So it was on Sega CD is where I originally played it. And I think, going kind of deep on it, it was licensed from I want to say it was one of the games, I could be wrong, licensed from a company called Cinemaware that made a lot of Commodore Amiga games, and they were just starting to get into like FMV and had filmed a bunch of stuff for a bunch of games. They had like It Came from the Desert FMV game. They had a football game that was all FMV. I don't even know if that ever released. But then I think they were working on Sewer Shark because I saw them at a trade show and they showed me all this stuff. So, anyways, it's this combo, and it had existed for a long time, but here it was on Sega CD, and you go back and you look at it now, and it's just like, how can you even tell that's video? It's like four colors, and but at the time it was awesome, and you're just like, you're basically like flying down these FMV tunnels, and every once in a while, a like creature, a mutant or something, will jump out of the edges of the screen at you or whatever, and you have to blast it. And so, the graphics on the Sega CD were used to have like, like lasers blasting and scores, and maybe even like the cockpit frame of the ship. And so it's like, it's kind of thrilling. It's kind of shows the technology at one of its highs, I think, in terms of what it was capable of, right?
Yeah.
But it's not like the greatest game ever, but it's really good. I mean, that's the thing. You're talking to me, and I have a soft spot for, I don't know necessarily bad games, but for so bad it's good games.
Yeah,
And I
that's
feel
fair.
like a lot of FMV games over the years have fallen into that category.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah, and this was not. I mean, to me, Night Trap is so bad it's good. This is like, it's kind of it's not so bad, but it is good. It's not so good. It's kind of right in the middle. It's like flying down the sewer in your sewer shark, trying not to hit the walls. It's a game that where the big tagline, or one of the big taglines in it, was the guy shouting at you not to commit suicide. Yeah, I'd recommend people check that out on YouTube or wherever. I don't know if I'd say you should go buy a actual Sega CD and Genesis and a copy of the game, but
So
I'll have to dig it out now.
after kind of the 90s, there was a pretty big lull in
Mhm,
FMVs, basically up until 2014, when we started seeing games like Her Story, Late Shift, Contradiction.
mhm.
There was even a new Tex Murphy game in 2014.
Yeah, I remember that.
And like even up until recently, we got like At Dead of Night.
Mhm.
And it kind of seems like all these indie developers who grew up with FMVs are kind of running with the genre and kind of making these games that they had kind of always hoped FMV would be.
Uh-huh.
Do you,
Yeah.
so do you have like a modern FMV game that you would recommend?
Oh, I mean, yeah, there are lots of enjoyable ones now, and I was gonna say that along the lines of you talking about how indie developers who grew up with the medium are exploring it again
Yeah.
in different ways. I mean, I think that's what's really interesting about it is like, live action video is all around us, right? It's TV,
Yeah.
YouTube, whatever. And so it's like part of our lives, but it's not really a big part of games anymore even. I mean, there was a time where I don't know if you're talking about it, but there were obviously PlayStation 1 games where you'd have like a game, like a 3D game with polygons and everything, but all of the cutscenes would be like full motion video, right? So it was even like integrated more into stuff like that. But in modern times, with a lot of the indie games, they are using it, I think, in creative ways, and that's what's sort of keeping it alive, I think, and keeping interest in it. And unbelievably, or maybe believably, like there are some actually really great games that are based around full motion video that are either being released or will be released or were released just in the past few years. And you mentioned my favorite of them, which is Her Story. And I think it was just such a clever use of the medium, and the fact that you have a modern computers. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. You can have the game can be huge. You can quickly switch between scenes. You can have everything be non-linear. All of that. And I think personally, I'm a true crime fan, and it just kind of pushed all the right buttons for me. I thought it was really well done, well acted. Yeah. And that's one that I feel like if you give someone Sewer Shark and then you tell them go play Her Story, they're just like, "What?" Or Night Trap to Her Story or something. And you can see the evolution there. You
Yeah.
can kind of see like it's gone from being this gimmick to being, like a central part of a game that's actually a really compelling game.
Yeah, it's almost like the not to kind of speak ill to the FMV games of the 90s, but it definitely feels like it's
No.
it's in the hands of people who like love the genre now. There is like quite a few promising upcoming FMV games, like Ghosts. It's a game that you can
Mhm.
only play at night, and you have to like try and survive this like supernatural enemy. And
That's
there's
awesome.
oh
That
yeah,
sounds
it's
great.
amazing. I'll send you a link
I love
later.
that idea. Yeah.
And then there's like a game called Hand of Doom, and it's basically like Doom, but everything like the enemies and like your hands and what you do with your hands are FMV.
That's super
Yeah.
interesting to integrate things that way.
So are there any of these that like you know about that like are that you might be keeping an eye on, or like any like very recent ones that have just come out that you're kind of that are kind of catching your attention?
So I know that there are a lot on the horizon, and with the indie world being just so massive, it's
Yeah.
always sort of like landing upon, Steam's recommending to me, oh, you liked her story, so check this out, or recommending semi things like you mentioned, the
Tex Murphy.
Murphy,
Yeah.
the Text Murphy game, or something like that. Like, always getting these recommendations that I'm just always sort of like, I'll save that from my wish list or whatever. It sounds cool. But Hand of Doom, that's definitely one that I had seen, coverage of before. And I thought, yeah, like you were saying, this is a really kind of different approach to it. And I think that's also going to, bring up debate around, hey, wait,
FMV.
is this FMV
Yeah.
or is this, interactive, whatever? So yeah, I think that, among those, I know that there's one from the developer of Her Story and Telling Lies, I think has an even more sort of ambitious game
Okay,
coming
interesting.
that clearly a name or something didn't stick with me in their marketing.
Yeah.
That's not their fault. It's just, there's too many games out there to keep track of. But yeah, he's working on his third game, and it sounds really promising. It's got a lot of, great, even more well-known actors, I think, than in Telling Lies. And so I'm kind of always, looking forward to seeing whatever the developer of those games does. And I always kind of know they're going to be like kind of around some core like concepts of like investigation or
Yeah.
something like that. So yeah, I mean, but other than that, to be honest, I'm looking forward to reading your piece and
Thank you.
finding out what yeah. I mean, that's how I get by these days, right? Is like I'm now the consumer of the games journalism, and so I'm always just like, yeah, I gotta get my news. I gotta support, all my games journalist friends out there, and always read different like few different versions of articles and just be like, all right, let's see this person's take on it, this person's take. And it's like most of the time you do that for reviews, but like I'm the kind of person that does that with news stories. I'll like read
Oh,
multiple
yeah.
news stories about an announcement or something just to see, what someone's take is on it.
Well, that way it's always kind of interesting because some people might catch certain things while they might just kind of slip by
Hmm.
other people, right? So I completely agree with that. But
Yeah.
speaking to you enjoying the kind of investigation style of
Hmm.
game, is there any other genre of gaming that kind of hits those highs of FMV for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Or maybe not
you
even like a specific genre, but
uh-huh.
like specific games. Like for me, I'm a fan of whodunits. They're like
Mhm.
you give me a whodunit and I can lose hours and hours and hours to it. So like Return of the Oberdin or
Mhm. Mhm.
Unheard. It's kind of like Return of the Oberdin, but it's kind
Mhm.
of yeah. But games like that kind of do it for me.
Of all of them I can think, and yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, I could say, I'm excited about Return to Monkey Island because I
Yeah,
feel like a lot of those old point and click games, they were sort of like solving a puzzle, and it's like, so with Dragon's Lair, it was all about kind of solving the puzzle of each level,
yeah,
right? And so I kind of, always like that. And so you have that out of like point and click games. But what I was getting at was there's, David Cage's games for Quantic Dream, right? Which
yeah,
I have to come up whenever you're talking about like interactive movies. So I mean, I've played them all. I Heavy Rain, I thought, really got me. It really
yeah.
like hooked me in, even with, Press X to Jason and all that stuff. I mean, that was, if anything, that was reminiscent of, the Sega CD stuff. I'm like, oh, it's like Night Trap level, Press X to Jason. And then they got more sophisticated. And you could tell they got more like international input and things
Yeah.
like that. And so playing like even wait, how many have they had? They've had
So it was
uh
Prophecy
Heavy Rain.
slash Indigo Prophecy,
Oh,
and
right,
then
right, right.
Heavy Rain, and then that other one that came out like a couple years ago.
Yeah. Well, there was Beyond Two
Oh,
Souls,
right, that I forgot about that one completely.
right.
I
And
just I
then
can't think. Oh, Detroit Become Human.
yeah, Detroit
Yes.
Become Human. which is, yeah, I heard the title of that and I was like, wait, what? Okay, cool. Let's see what this is all about. Yeah, and so I've played all of them and I've enjoyed them. I still like linear FMV guy, like with Dragon's Lair or whatever. So I'm always sort of like, okay, I've played through that one story,
Yeah.
and I could tell it could go all these different directions, but I don't know if like, I've got a lot of games to get through. I'm an important guy, so I need to, like move on or something like that. But those are the ones that have, I'd say, the most. And it's not just because they have kind of QTEs all over the place. It's just like investigating, solving something, trying things, in different ways, or trying to think around some things. And I mean, I guess you could see that, I liked her story and telling lies, and so it's all about kind of solving problems. So it's like I don't get enough of it at work. I've got to solve problems outside in my games, right?
Again, thank you for sitting down and taking the time out of your day to talk to me about FMV, your past experiences with it, and what you're looking forward to in the future from the genre. If you'd like to read more about FMV, be sure to head on over to DreadXP and read the article that these interviews are actually part of. And until then, we'll see you later.